Thanks to all the presenters for their great presentations. Everyone stayed on time, which is amazing given the amount of material they must have gathered during all the reconnaissance and the important things to relay. There's some time that we have for questions. I promised that we would entertain some questions from the internet audience, and I'm told we have nearly 1,000 people viewing from afar. So I was going to start out, there was a question that I'm not sure who we should ask to, but there was a question if there was any damage in any of the instrumented buildings that were located in the affected area.
There were instrumented buildings, a few, relatively few. To my knowledge, none of those were severely damaged, but I'm not absolutely certain of that. The NICE at UCLA team brought down a series of instruments as well as data acquisition system, and went about quickly instrumenting several buildings that had been damaged. And so there should be records from several aftershocks regarding performance of those buildings and whether damage can be detected in them. Mark?
I think John Mario from UCSD went down. There were several instrumented isolated bridges that he's going to look at. Hopefully we can get something from him.
Yes. Good. Another question that came in was, again, a general one. Was there any evidence of vertical accelerations having an impact on the damage that was observed, either for bridges or buildings?
There is something that Mark didn't observe. That was that
why don't you get, for the benefit of the people in the internet, in the ether?
I think there is something that Mark did not observe that was underneath the Jacqueline Bridge. You could see the bumping of the girders against the seats, and suspecting that there could be vertical accelerations that are pretty high.
Okay.
And they are damaged. I have pictures.
Steve? In front of one of the hospitals, there was a very large span, open web truss canopy, about 70, 80-foot span, and one of the 4 supports was very strange. I won't explain it, but I couldn't figure out any way that it would fail other than this large span structure started responding vertically.
All right. A couple of people put into some answers to Mark Yashinsky's challenges of why certain bridges were damaged, and I think the email messages are far too long for me to go into now, so I'll just relay the messages to Mark and let him respond individually. Mark also had an answer to this last question.
Oh, well, vertical accelerations, we've been arguing about it for years. Jenny said that those girders, those end girders on those overcrossings, that shear crack was a vertical shear crack, but I don't know. I've never seen any example of vertical acceleration that I thought did real damage to a bridge so far.
Yeah. All right. Do we have a question from the audience here, perhaps? Yes.
Yeah, this is for probably Jack or Bill. Did you have any impressions of the performance of confined masonry buildings?
Only impressions. I saw many. Oddly, I have 20,000 photographs in my disk here collected from the team, and oddly, I was struggling to find some photographs of them, but several of them that I saw, and I observed many in Chillon and other cities performed very well. There are some examples where they didn't, and so I think some further study of those would be warranted. Others who are in Chile, though, maybe observe things as well. Francisco?
They perform well for the most part.
Yeah.
Up to 6-story high. Beyond that, probably they're having been
Andy?
Any other comments?
Same thing we observed too,
Yeah.
the conformation.
Yeah.
Another question. Yes. Wait for the microphone, if you will.
So this is mostly a ground motion question. So I was wondering whether more than one records are available for us to compared to different attenuation relationships that are existing, and whether we have looked at those, how do they compare to median and the range of the estimates that current subduction zone attenuation relationships estimate?
There are several records that the group at the University of Chile has. To date, we have not received digital copies of those. My hope is that those will be forthcoming soon. I think they'll be very important for the people of Chile, for studies that need to be done to better understand what happened to some of the buildings. They'll be very important for Chilean engineers who have to defend themselves against what's bound to be accusations of under-designed buildings. And I think they'll be important for the world community to better understand attenuation relations, just distributions of damage, and the like in this great earthquake. And so we're hopeful that those records will be forthcoming very soon.
There's one in the back corner. Oop.
Since the earlier Chilean earthquake in the 80s and the current one, for non-structural mitigation, was anything done that did work, like in the microbiology building? Were any microscopes or incubators restrained at all?
No, there was no seismic consideration at all in that building, either mechanical, electrical, or laboratory equipment. So we don't know whether it would have worked.
I suppose we'll have to wait. We won't hear it.
Marcos in the back corner. And then David. Oh, we will need a speaker for the responder.
Can you relate the segment of the fault that broke to the section that broke in 1985 and the section that broke in 1960?
Yeah, it fills that gap. The section that broke this time was just a little bit of overlap on the northern end of the 1960, and then just a little bit of overlap on the southern end of the 1985. It just fills that gap. It's also the area, but a little bit larger than, we think, the section that broke in 1835 that was documented by Charles Darwin.
Interestingly, there's a paper which I think is now on the EERI reconnaissance website or Learning from Earthquakes website. Came out within the last year just to address this, and there was a estimate of an upper bound for the earthquake magnitude, I think, of 8.5, so rather close to what happened.
I think Dave and Fred. Fred and Dave.
Yeah. Do the Chilean building codes require non-structural attachments, anchorage bracing?
Yes. They have there is a CP table very much like ours, a little bit more general in terms of the description. But according to Eduardo Miranda, maybe you could answer, but Eduardo looked at it in some detail, and he says that the forcing functions for design are not really simple. So he's not sure whether that might have caused some lack of implementation. We had a couple of comments by engineers, design engineers, who kind of pointed at, said, well, we thought the architect was going to do it, and the architect thought the mechanical was going to do it. We've been through that, but we are a little bit ahead of them, or considerably ahead of them, I think, in the implementation of that section of the code.
Dave had a question.
Bill Holmes mentioned the seismically isolated buildings. Could you mention the most common form of devices, and do you know the displacement capacities of those devices?
So
well, research needs that I've certainly noticed is that there is much more information on the hospitals. There's 100 hospitals. We only managed to visit 14. The Johns Hopkins people spent a lot of of time coming up with a very, very good protocol to find out exactly what happened, where the patients, how many patients came from the outside, how many patients did they have from the inside, all kinds of information, what precisely caused evacuations and so on. So we really would like to go back and be more thorough. We were only able to study one region completely, and it consisted of the Los Angeles Regional Hospital, which was quite large, and then these 6 little satellites, which interestingly were not damaged at all. So.
The question was on the isolation devices.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was talking at the time. They were rubber. They were rubber and high damping rubber, made locally in Chile. There are, I think, 9 isolated buildings in Chile. 3 of them hospitals that we saw in Santiago. 2 of them were quite small. We could not see any movement. We literally could not find, any movement on them. The large military hospital is brand new. It was a beautiful piece of seismic work, one of the best I've ever seen. Everything was braced perfectly. It moved 15 centimeters, designed for 35 centimeters. Next door, it had a fixed base bed tower, which, according to rumor, got trashed. But it was open, so whatever kind of trashed it got they were able to fix it, to clean it up and keep the people in it. The other isolated buildings, my understanding, were not in the shaken area.
Would anyone care to comment on the reasons for long water or power or telecommunication outages?
Well, I know part of the issue with water was loss of power. Does anyone have any, at least in Concepcion?
There was a question from the internet, and it may be premature to ask, but was there any observations on any retrofit that was done prior to the earthquake that seemed more effective than others? Some were thought to be ineffective, but was there some things that we can see that did seem to work and people should have been encouraged to pursue?
Well, the team that went to Viña del Mar looked through some of those buildings, and in one case where the retrofit involved adding a concrete layer on top of existing walls, the anchors between the 2 layers were insufficient, woefully insufficient, and popped out. So that was one case where there was simply a failure in the implementation. We don't know much more about what worked and what didn't.
Well, I think there will be many studies looking at these things in the future. I think, given the time and our promise to be punctual today, I would like to thank the audience for their participation, especially those who are joining us by the internet, and especially to thank the speakers for today, and giving us the benefit of their visits, and also to thank all of those others who joined them to go to Chile and contribute to this massive effort. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today, and thanks for the sponsors for providing the funding to be able to do this.